This is 37th Street Radio and TV, and of course, we are out here hooking you up with the best of the best interviews. And today we have a very special guest. So, guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Kyle Stroebel. I'm a colorist from Cape Town, South Africa. And yeah, I focus on kind of high-end commercial work, long-form movies and series, and yeah, music videos from time to time as well.
Yeah, so we'll just go straight into it. When you say that you are a colorist, I just want you to explain to maybe somebody with just basic knowledge, what does a colorist really do?
Okay, so basically what we do is tell story and emotion through color on screen. So effectively think of it as kind of like a high-end Instagram filter world over the footage that we receive, but using it in a narrative way to kind of help tell stories, to kind of guide the viewer, as well as to kind of make it like an aesthetically pleasing image. A lot of people will know that when you shoot something just even on a cell phone camera with a little bit of editing can make a really big difference. We do it in really specific, really finite color controlled ways, so that filmmakers are able to kind of present their vision the best they want, or the best that they can.
So is this something that you wanted to do since childhood, or it's something that the interest just grew up when you were an adult?
It wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do as a kid. I don't think I really knew that it existed when I was a child. I went to film school nearly 20 years ago. And at the time, everything was still being shot on film and celluloid. So the only way to get your film from the old school process negative into a digital format so that the editors could edit with and so that we could actually see what we were working with without it being on the film was to go through a process that was called telecine, where you would shine a light effectively through the color negative, and then it would get received on a microchip and you get a picture on the screen. So we were taking our films there as students, and we were sitting with a colorist at the time, and all of a sudden these images that we thought were, maybe there was something wrong, or the exposure was incorrect, or the lighting was kind of poor, all of a sudden came to life. There was depth, there was an incredible color tone, and really morphed an image from something quite boring into something quite exciting. And at the time, I'd injured my back with a camera on set, and we were sitting on these like beautiful leather couches in an air-conditioned room getting served snacks. And I thought this is actually a really cool way to be part of the film industry, with maybe personally set necessarily wasn't the place that I wanted to be. So yeah, so I got an internship at a post-production company after I graduated, and interned kind of literally just making coffee and carrying boxes of negative around the office for, I mean, we were starting at 4 a.m. in the morning. I used to go out, party the night before, literally walk in the morning, collect the day's rushes, and then we would start kind of processing them with a colorist. And slowly I kind of got some of my own jobs, and then started maybe developing a bunch of my own clients, and then got to work on bigger and better work as time went by. And eventually, yeah, I've managed to make a bit of a career of it myself.
So just according to maybe your experience, do you think that maybe the industry is now really seeing the importance of colorists? Because, like, you know, when you look at 7-10 years back, maybe there were no cheap cameras, and you know, nowadays, because of the social media and technology that guys can access, everybody is shooting even in their home, in their house. So do you think that really maybe with the growth of technology and things like social media, the industry has really started to see that you guys are important even when it comes to making of videos?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as from every filmmaker's point of view, they want the best possible imagery out of the work that they produce. And we, unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of the time anywhere in the world are guided by Hollywood movies, at least as our basis for understanding for what a high-end production actually means. So when we think, a lot of consumers really need to have a good grade or a well-colored piece of work, because that's how their minds are used to consuming high-end work. When there isn't a good grade, or the colors are a bit lacking, your viewer can tell that there's something a little bit lacking within the production value, even if they can't necessarily point at exactly what's wrong with it. There's like a sense of when something has a lower production value, even without knowing exactly what it is. And I think that's a lot of the time where a good colorist comes in, because we are able to give that finish to the image that makes it look of high quality, that there's of high value, and that the filmmakers actually know what they're doing. So I think a lot of the stuff that we do is quite subconscious. The viewer isn't pointing at the grade and going, that looks brilliant and that was really well graded, but they know in their kind of emotional reaction when they watch the film that that there is a kind of a level above. So I think even if you are shooting social media, you can see when something is just a little bit, I don't know, looks a bit tacky or it looks a bit cheap. It's because there isn't someone necessarily, I mean, one of the reasons is that there's not someone at the end of the kind of color pipeline making sure that the work looks of high quality.
You talked, well, when you are describing what a colorist really means, you've touched on something, and you're saying that color can also be used to create a certain mood when you're watching a film or maybe a music video. So I don't know how you guys work, but maybe you can just explain to us, maybe during your experience, some of these colors in film, what do they really mean? If we are watching maybe a movie and we see that the scene is maybe red, what does that mean? Maybe green, maybe yellow, I don't know. You can just tell us some of these things.
I mean, okay, so to use some films of the past, if you look at something like The Revenant, which was that that Leonardo DiCaprio movie where he's chased by the bear, I think it was, thinking back. And the whole goal was to make the snowy tundra look so stark and arid and cold, and to make him feel isolated. So when you look at the palette that's being used, there's no strong skin tones. Everything's quite muted. You really want to feel the temperature of the world, of this like kind of snowy environment that this guy's in, kind of fighting the forces of nature, and you want it to feel a little bit uncomfortable and quite sad. So it's very cold and blue, but lacks any kind of vibrancy. Where if you look at something like a comedy movie, and you look at I don't know, The Hangover, for instance, and then these bright poppy colors that show like the intensity of like Las Vegas and this party atmosphere. Everything's very saturated. There's a warmth to it. It's quite inviting. So it's kind of, I'm using two polar opposite worlds of one that's very uninviting and one that's very welcoming. And that's in a very basic level, I guess. That's what I'm talking about. You see it a lot through advertising as well. Color has obviously also changed from period to period. We follow trends as colorists, as filmmakers. And if you look at kind of the 60s and that Kodak Etrichrome look, that's without even hearing audio, without knowing story or whatever, you look at an image and you go, I know that's from the 60s. And that's because of the way that those color palettes were handled, because of the way that film received light back in the day. Whereas now, as technology and trends have developed, you've got a very like kind of modern slick look that you see in like futuristic sci-fi movies, where the lines are very clean and it's all quite hard, where the softness of the olden days kind of can tell a story that we can replicate nowadays. But yeah, I mean, it's that kind of, those kind of mediums that you kind of setting the environment and the tone so that the viewer knows exactly where they are before they actually hearing anything or seeing any like visual evidence of it.
I don't know how many African countries you have been to, but I just want to ask from you, just talking with industry players and looking at our production, do you think that maybe in Africa, can we reach Hollywood standards, or do we have a long way to go?
I think we're there already, to be honest with you. I think we're starting to see it, African filmmaking really develop. I'm busy doing 2 films at the moment out of Nigeria that are built for Amazon, I think. And the quality of films that I'm seeing are visually, at least, are on par with their Hollywood counterparts. I think there's also a big kind of recognition of where Africa is as a filmmaking continent. Netflix, I know we partner with quite a lot. We've seen how their big push at the moment is to find the next Squid Game. Squid Game was their biggest series that's ever been produced in terms of viewership and profit. And it was from a market that doesn't speak English, doesn't accede to historical Hollywood tropes, or it was a breakout of the mold. And Netflix, I know, thinks that can happen in Africa. And an African story told by Africans in an African way has the ability to capture a global audience. I know I did the first season of a show called Blood and Water for Netflix. And that, I think, was one of the top ranked shows in America during its prime. And it got to #1 in Germany, and we're seeing a kind of a couple of Asian countries. So we're seeing a global recognition of African filmmakers. And that's one example of many. I'm just happen to pick it out because I'm quite close to it. I was privileged enough to do, in 2020, I did a film called My Octopus Teacher that won the Oscar for Best Documentary. So I'm obviously speaking somewhat from a South African context, but we've done films for Senegal and Sierra Leone and Ethiopia, Kenya. There's incredible commercials coming from Malawi and from Ghana, and we're seeing as we're growing as an industry, we're starting to kind of develop our own filmmaking language, and I think the world is kind of really starting to pay attention. So I think it's coming. I think we haven't reached our peak, but if the kind of global understanding of where we are is anything to go by, it's very encouraging.
Yeah, I'm from Nairobi, Kenya, and I've been I once talked to a videographer, and many of our East African artists have been coming to South Africa to shoot music videos, and we were just talking why this is happening, and he was talking to me about Kenya. We are directly at the equator, so when it comes to lighting for video, our videos don't look good compared to when the videos are shot in South Africa. So I know you really understand you really also understand the aspect of lighting. So I just want you to talk about lighting and also in relation to coloring.
Right. No, I mean, my understanding of lighting and just the way an image is captured is pivotal to what I do. So I work directly with a director of photography and a director every day. So I'm not in isolation. I do work with the filmmakers. It is a topic that comes up quite a lot. I don't think it is as straightforward as equatorial placement versus South Africa. I think infrastructurally, South Africa is a very developed country from a filmmaking point of view. The reason that is not necessarily because of ourselves, although there are very, very globally talented filmmakers here, but we have to acknowledge the fact that people from all over the world have been coming to specifically Cape Town and shooting big Hollywood movies for ages. just they come, they shoot, they put everything in the can, and then they go back to America or to Europe or to wherever they came from, and they just actually use us as location. What that's done is built up the local industry though simultaneously. So we've got incredible gear houses, and we've got sets of lenses that don't exist anywhere else in Africa. And we're able to do things because we've been taught effectively over decades by these international guys exactly how to do films to an international standard. So I think that's one thing. I have to point out that I think, yeah, the light is great down here, but because we've got such a developed industry, we've got the ability to, and the kind of technical know-how behind high-end execution to produce stuff of really high quality. Secondly, the light is not a negligible thing. I think specifically here in Cape Town, when we get sunny days, the light is just particularly very beautiful. So there is obviously that as a factor, but like I was saying earlier, depends on where you shoot, but I've done stuff in Africa that I think is some of the most beautiful material that I've ever worked on. And I think that's just because it's shot incredibly well. And they've got lucky with the weather. There's sometimes clear, beautiful days. I think what often happens is there's a slight haze in the air throughout Africa, depending on where obviously you go, depending how tropical it is. Whereas here it's a little bit cleaner and the light is really beautiful. But I think it's the way you handle that light and what you do with it. I think some of the most beautiful stuff comes from the far north and like the Scandinavian countries in Europe, where it's cloudy and moody and the light is very soft. But that's just something that's a visual that I really like. It's not necessarily that it's not to everyone's taste. But I'd be interested to get other filmmakers' opinions on that. But from my side, I've seen stuff shot in such a beautiful way all over Africa that I don't think it can be limited to light quality alone.
You've described a lot, and you've just talked about Scandinavian countries and how their lighting due to the weather. So do you feel like maybe depending on the environment where you are, do you think that maybe a videographer should just have the skill to handle things according to the environment where you are, or they can continue complaining of this?
No, they can continue complaining. That's fine. I'm not saying to stop complaining. And I mean, look, it's a lot of the time it's lucky. We have people who come from all over the world to come here, and sometimes it's raining for a week. No matter how skilled you are, you're not going to make it look like a beautiful sunny environment. I mean, you obviously somewhat a victim of your own circumstance with weather. So it's not as, I can't say that it's as easy as that, but there are some tools, some tricks and tips along the way that will definitely help you get there. I think you also got to remember is that, and I see it a lot, is that the budgets for African material don't come anywhere close to the international counterparts at all. I think if you've got enough money, you can do anything in film. You can go into VFX and you can replace the skies, and you can rent 18K lights that just almost change the direction of the sun. But there's a limitation of that a lot of the time. So I don't think it's necessarily a videographer's skill, because if you've got $10 million to shoot a commercial, it's probably going to look much better than if you have 10,000.
Yeah, and basing also on your experience, the projects that you have worked on, I want you to talk about these YouTube tutorials. I don't know if maybe you go to YouTube and check out these tutorials. So you having the knowledge that you have, do you think these YouTube tutorials sometimes the knowledge is too basic, or it's not that accurate? For a guy who is starting, will these YouTube tutorials really help me, or I should just look for a professional like you?
It depends. I think if there was one piece of advice around tutorials, is don't only consume one source. Don't only have one guy that you follow, that you do everything the way he does. I get perspective from multiple different places to see how different people do different things. Yeah, I'm personally, it's not really my thing, the tutorial thing, because I think a lot of the time people do stuff that and tell you a way to do it, and it forms the basis of your knowledge. And if one of the core pillars of that knowledge is incorrect, then everything built on top of that, it just you've got an error in the beginning of your workflow, can become, you'll never quite solve the issue if you're a couple of steps down the line. And I see a lot of people who, I'm going to take an example. There's a very frequent one in at least color grading circles is, how do I do the look from the Joker? How do I make film something and make it look like it was the movie The Joker? And often what happens is they've taken a still image, or they've taken a single video clip, and they've made that one clip look like the Joker, fine. But the problem with color grading is going, okay, I've got an excellent single shot. How do I make all the other shots in my movie or in my commercial look like that one shot? And that, a lot of the times, those tutorials will never be able to cover the kind of matching that scene up, because they've done one thing that's worked for that one shot, but it ostensibly is actually incorrect in the way they've gone about doing it. So I don't think that, I'm not to say that internet YouTube tutorials are a bad thing. I think they do offer a lot of guidance, but to take it with an open mind that this isn't necessarily the correct way to do it, and to look at various other sources, because I think often it's incorrect and it actually can do more harm than good.
I want you to shed light a little bit on music videos. So I'm in Kenya, and let's say I do a couple of music videos and I send them to you. So according to you, just do not even talk about maybe the coloring aspect. I just want you to talk about a video, a wholesome video. So for you, when you are looking at these videos, what's a good video to you?
It doesn't matter what's a good video to me, because a good video to me doesn't necessarily mean A, it's a good video, or B, it's going to be a successful video either. It's a hard thing to pinpoint for me exactly. But I can tell you what I do acknowledge is film skills done well. So I think I often find a music video is maybe not as good when it tries to become a little bit too complicated and tries to emulate. You can't emulate a Janet Jackson music video necessarily on a home budget. But if you do well shot, well constructed scenes very well with good, simple editing that's not too over the top, I find often what happens is that it communicates what you're trying to do a lot better. And things where it tries to get overcomplicated or tell too much of a story, I just see it falling down a little bit more often. So if there's an advice to aspiring, not high-end, top of their game guys, but if there is a piece of advice, is to keep it simple, focus on what you are doing and do small things really well, as opposed to trying to do a big thing and getting it wrong.
You are in a field where, like, nowadays technology really changes very fast. So I want you to talk about how do you deal with the fast change in technology. You are using a software, you hear there is an update, or you hear that there is a new software which is better than the software that you have right now. So how do you deal with that? Because nowadays technology changes very fast. It's not like back in the day.
Yeah. So there's a principle that we adhere to called Moore's law, which basically says that the quality or quantity, the wording I might get it wrong, but Moore's law basically says that technology will double every year. We're slowly, it's becoming slightly slower now, where it might be 1.5 to 2 years. But what is a graphics card that is X powerful today, in 2 years' time, there will be one that is twice as powerful. So from our side, we keep up with the technological trends on the front end. So we see what are the cameras shooting. The big red cameras shoot highly data intensive files, and we need to be able to work with those files. And we kind of work as per what the requirements are of the jobs. But it's a critical part of our business, choosing what to do and where to invest money. It's also part of why color grading a film, and I'm speaking from a color point of view, there is quite an expensive process, because we have to keep abreast of what the industry is doing, like you say. So we have a big research and development department in the company that I work for, which is called Refinery in Cape Town. And their job is basically to see what is happening technologically in the world, and then what we need to purchase and invest as part of like the business. What we are seeing is that it is becoming increasingly more successful. More accessible. Where when I first started out, a big tele-cine machine was well over $1 million. Then, I mean, you were looking at between $1 to $1.5 million to just set up a single suite. Now, anyone with a Mac M1, M2 chip can process the highest end ARRI camera on a laptop. So slowly but surely, it's becoming slightly more accessible. The prices are slowly starting to come down. But it's about wise investment and seeing where the trends of the industry is going, so that we can kind of stay parallel to that the whole time.
You can talk about the projects that you have worked on, and you can also talk about maybe future projects if you're comfortable with that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you would have to go onto my IMDb page just to properly go through some projects. Like I said, yeah, Blood and Water from Netflix was my first big Netflix original, followed by My Octopus Teacher, which, like I said, won the Academy Award. And that was that was an incredible achievement for us, and kind of helped my career in so many ways, because I think any filmmaker who's got an Oscar attached to their project, it really helps the business. I'll say that. So that was an incredible one. I've also done a Netflix original series called Jiver, which was about kind of a dancing series set in South Africa. There are, unfortunately, the reality is with Netflix, with Amazon, and with Disney Plus, which is making a push into Africa now, there are projects that I have coming up associated with all those networks, but the non-disclosure agreements, I can't really talk about what's coming. But there's a big Netflix series based on an existing Netflix original series being shot by the same team who did Blood and Water. Which is very exciting. And then previously, I'm trying to think what really stands out. From a narrative perspective, we did a film called Barakat, which was South Africa's entry into the Oscars last year. Fortunately, it didn't make it through, but yeah, there's an old film that I did called Tess, that about a prostitute working in South Africa. That was something very close to my heart. And then at the moment, what I'm doing is focusing very much on commercials. The commercial work tends to be very exciting for me, because there's if you think about it, and I'm talking in South African Rand terms, a big kind of decent South African feature film is costing about 10 million Rand as a budget, where I've recently done a commercial that for 1 minute costs about double that. So there's a lot more attention to detail and focus on small little things, which is very gratifying for me. So I've done works for Volkswagen, for Audi, a lot of Adidas commercials. There've been a couple of big things for big brands, big banks, and investment firms around here. If anyone is keen to go and check it out, you can go and watch my Instagram account. All my favorite, most recent work is there.
As we are finishing up, I just want you to talk to guys who want to get into this creative space. You know, in this space, creatives are usually very different. They think differently. So for guys who maybe are starting out, just give them an advice as we are finishing up.
Do as much as you can. Get your hands on as much material as possible. And there's an old saying of you're only good at something once you've done 10,000 hours. Unfortunately, I think in film and post-production specifically, that's 20,000 hours, maybe 30. The reality is that you only learn how to solve a problem when you are presented with that problem. And in post-production, we are problem fixers by nature. So the biggest piece of advice is just to work on as much material as you can get your hands on. And then to start developing relationships with filmmakers as soon as possible. I only get work when filmmakers shoot films. So I've developed relationships with those filmmakers from a very young age, from film school, and I've been working on it and massaging that for 20 years. It's a very hard thing you're never going to all of a sudden become good at what you do, because you're not going to be able to work on all those projects. So grow with those filmmakers, find a director or a DOP who is doing really cool stuff and offer to work on their material for free or for a low cost, just to get that experience. And then, yeah, just don't be afraid to ask questions and to hound filmmakers that you like. Because the best way to actually learn is not necessarily through a film school or anything, but being around people whose work you admire, because they're going to teach you the stuff that they know. And yeah, watch films, learn to tell stories by what you liked in individual films and being able to point that out.
Yeah, thank you so much, bro, for giving us your time. We wish you all the best.
Yeah, cheers. You guys too. Take care.
Thank you.